we're going to go ahead and start here in a second. And, I've got three wonderful doctors that have very graciously agreed to be a part of this panel. I'm going to turn it over to them in a second. But before I do that, we've kind of prepared a short, quick presentation on the medical field, which I'm going to take them through, and then I'm going to turn it over to each of them so they can tell us about their background, and then we can open it up for questions for everybody. So let me share my screen. 1 second. Okay, so while we're waiting for people to get in, I'm going to just quickly run through a couple of things just to set up the conversation. As we had talked about in October, the next couple of months, every month we're focusing on a different career. We're starting with medicine. For those of you guys that didn't see in October, we just kind of went through the college admissions process and how college, the applications, how a lot of that works. That's posted on our PTSA website. Like I said, the first month is actually medicine, and I'll take you through a couple of things about it, and then, like I said, I'll turn it over to our guests. So medicine is one of the most rigorous, it's one of the most competitive things. Technology in this field is changing a lot, but it's a pretty high stress lifestyle, as I've heard from Anika and Sritha and others. You've got the residencies and you've got further specializations that are required for each of these. Here's some, you can take a look at the links and all that are on there, but some of the residencies are in anesthesiology. Dr. Singatham is actually anesthesiologist, internal medicine, family medicine. Dr. Godwani she practices in family medicine. And then emergency medicine, which Dr. Kantipuri is in emergency medicine. I'm going to introduce them a little bit later on. One thing that I see a lot of kids do is, and I hope the three doctors can elaborate on this, is that I think a lot of people think that in order to go to medicine, they have to do undergrad in some sciences, biology, or maybe chemistry. That's not necessarily the case. If you do a non-science major, you just have to take the pre-med requirements in order to go into medical school. But the goal for college and even graduate school is really, the goal is to create options for yourself, right? Not pigeonhole yourself in a particular area. And so, a lot of times, like we've seen people who, like we had a student who went to one of the 8-year medical programs in Chicago and did anthropology undergrad and then went into medical school. You can do anything undergrad and go into medical school as long as you have the proper foundation for it. There is, there's two paths to medicine. There's the MD and then there's the DO, and we'll cover that a little bit later on as well. And, they're in terms of practice, in terms of, the ability to do things traditionally seen in medicine, both are great. They both have to attend medical school, 4 years of school, plus a residency program. The licensing is actually very similar. It's in all 50 states, whereas maybe the DO started being, it was a smaller percentage in rural areas. Actually, that has changed a lot as well over the years. And they're now found in every specialty, both osteopathic doctors as well as medical doctors. You find them in all specialties now. The licensing examination is different, but pretty much everything else is very similar. And then, here are some joint med programs. So a lot of, after high school, you can actually do these, rather than doing undergrad and then medical school, you can actually do joint programs that will give you both a BS and an MD, or a BA and an MD in 6, 7, or 8 years. They'll save you a lot of time. The only thing is, they're highly competitive to get into. The SAT score and the GPA are pretty competitive. And I mean, they're looking for people that are that have a lot of this whole holistic admissions, there's a lot of things a lot of factors that kind of go into a lot of that stuff. So they're highly competitive. But if you can get into one, they save you a lot of time and a lot of hassle. And I think I'll let the doctors speak a little bit more about about the rigor of going from undergrad into medical school otherwise. And then here's some of the joint BSDO programs as well, and the duration of each one of them. And then this is, a list, and I'll send this out, but here's a list of internships for those who are interested in the medical field, things that they can experience on the research side, or just practical training, or just to understand whether this is really for them, right? Whether, what they're going to experience being a doctor in the medical field, if that's really what makes them happy, based on your strengths and your weaknesses, your likes and your dislikes. High school is really about figuring a lot of that stuff out. With that, I'm actually going to turn it over to our doctors. I'm going to introduce all three of them, and then I will give each of them a chance to kind of describe their experience from high school onwards to into medical school, and then into the profession itself, what they expected, what they didn't expect, what they like, what they don't like, and then we'll open it up for questions to all the students that are here. So I'll start with Dr. Sangatham. Dr. Sarita Sangatham she's an anesthesiologist in Dallas, Texas. She grew up in Houston, Texas. That's where I grew up. She did her undergrad from the University of Texas at Austin, and the medical school at University of Texas Southwestern Medical School. Dr. Amar Kantipuri, he's an emergency room physician in Fremont and San Leandro for Kaiser. He actually grew up in the Bay Area. He's from Cupertino. He graduated from Cupertino High School in 2011, then went to St. Louis, Missouri for undergrad and medical school. He graduated from the St. Louis University School of Medicine in 2019 and attended UC Davis in Sacramento for residency, for emergency room residency training before coming back to the Bay Area to work as an attending. And then Dr. Anika Godwani, she's a family medicine physician in Modesto, California. She's originally from Fremont, California, and actually attended Irvington High School herself. Her and her brother both did. She did her undergrad from UC Berkeley and then did medicine at Touro University here in California. So I want to thank all three of you guys for coming on here and talking to everyone, kind of taking us through your experiences. Sarita, why don't we start with you? If you would kind of take us through, your experiences from high school onwards, and what medicine is like for you, and then we'll go to Amar and Anika. Go ahead, Sarita. Oh, you're muted.
Hey, Rocky. So I went to high school in Houston, and then I went to UT Austin, just like you said. After UT Austin, so I was a psych major, and I was the first year that they did a BS in psychology instead of a BA. So I did a BS in psychology that just kind of helped me get some of the prereqs intertwined in my undergrad, and then I could still do all the psychology stuff. And then from there, I went to UT Southwestern, which is in Dallas, 4 years of medical school. After that, I did anesthesiology, which is 4 years. It's kind of a 1+3. So that first year can be either what they call transitional, where it's kind of intertwined in the 4-year program, or it can be 1 year of internal medicine or 1 year of surgery. So I did a little bit, they called it a transitional year. So it was four years total, all clumped together. After medical school, I did anesthesiology, which is another 4 years. I did that in Chicago. And then I chose to do a fellowship, which was 1 year long, and what's called regional anesthesia. It's just a anesthesia specialty. And I did that in Seattle, and then I came back to Dallas and I practice here now. Let's see, things to talk about. So a couple of things that you mentioned, Rocky, about college. Some of the things I'll just kind of touch upon some of the stuff that I wish people had said that I feel a little bit, strongly about. I think in college, you should absolutely not focus on biology or chemistry or any sciencey thing that you think is going to help you in medical school, because you will get that for the rest of medical school, and then you can use that the rest of your life. Your college experience, your undergrad is your chance to help you get well-rounded and allow you the opportunity to, study and learn something that you're otherwise not going to have any time to do later. So if you want to do, anthropology, engineering, whatever it is you want to do. And in fact, I think medical school is actually like that. I think if you do anything other than a science field, they're going to look at you as a more well-rounded person in general. So, I think that's something heavily to consider. I also think that I'm not a huge fan of the joint programs. I think a lot of people rely on the joint programs. It gives them a sense of security. If you get into a joint program straight out of high school, you're set for medical school. You don't have to worry the next 8 years. But fact is, if you're going to get into a joint program, then you're going to probably get into medical school. So that false sense of security, like you shouldn't have to worry about that. And I think that you lose out on the opportunity of, going to different places. I think being in different parts of the country, meeting different people, seeing different cultures, just in terms of, the Northeast versus West Coast versus the South. I think it's important to kind of just get around and explore and meet people and see where you fit in and learn different techniques and, thoughts and ideas from different people. So I think that take it one step at a time and, go around and try to get to the best place that you can get to at that stage. So.
Awesome. Anything else, Rita, you want to add, or I'll go on to Amar?
No, nothing else. You can go.
Okay, then we'll come back to you with the Q&A. Dr. Kuntibudi, do you want to give kind of some opening thoughts?
Sure, yeah. My name is Amar, one of the newer emergency medicine docs at Kaiser Fremont and San Leandro. I just wanted to say thank you guys for taking the time to join in. I really wish I had one of these sessions in high school, so could work on your PTA for organizing this. I know that this could be a stressful time for many of you guys, especially for the seniors, in deciding what you want to do with your lives. I always thought it was kind of crazy that they make you decide at like 16 or 17 what you want to do for the rest of your life. That kind of blew my mind. I'll tell you a little bit about my story. For me personally, I grew up in the heart of Silicon Valley. I grew up in Cupertino. So I thought for sure that I wanted to do computer science. I was like a huge tech nerd. I loved everything gadgets and computers. And towards this time, like November-ish, my senior year, I started to realize that a career and a hobby are like two very separate things. I found that like I didn't really enjoy my math classes at all, and I actually like dreaded them. I was watching like videos on coding and trying to learn Java and C++, and I was like bored out of my mind. And then the nail in the coffin for me was when I took a comp sci senior year and I dropped it within like a month because I realized I hated it, and I also had like a D in the class. So don't tell my mom. But so I scrambled, and it was like November of my senior year when I realized that I really didn't want to do computer science. By that time, I already applied to a few private schools with computer science and engineering in mind as my major. So I took a couple of weeks and I like reevaluated my life and took some time to like truly think about what I enjoyed and what I wanted to do. And I realized that my favorite classes at that time and what I like really looked forward to doing was journalism, political science. Like I loved my biology classes. I loved journalism, and I was taking a law class that year. And those were the only things I really enjoyed. So I hedged my bets and I applied for like biology and political science with the intent of either pursuing a career in or law or the sciences. So I went in kind of casting a wide net and kind of seeing what hit. Not the best plan in hindsight, but with a little bit of scrambling, that's kind of the best that I could come up with. So I applied to like all the UCs. I applied to some state schools, some private schools, and at the request of my parents, I actually applied to only one combined MD program in the Midwest, which is where I ended up going, St. Louis University. So college apps were a little bit weird. You guys might realize this in the next couple months. I got into schools that I thought like I had no shot at, and I got rejected from schools that I thought I was like a shoo-in for. Like, for example, I got rejected from like UC San Diego, but then got into like WashU and U Chicago. Didn't get into like Cal or UCLA. So like I thought like I was a failure because like all of my friends were going to like Berkeley or UCLA, and all these people were doing like pre-meds, and I'm like, I didn't get into any of those schools. Like, what am I really going to do? And then ultimately I chose to go to where I went for undergrad, which was university. And I went there because they had a really, really good health law program and a political science program. And then I also applied to that combined pre-med program, or sorry, combined MD program, where it wasn't a guaranteed admission, but it was like an early admission. So if you maintained a certain amount or a certain GPA and did certain classes, then they would allow you to apply earlier to med school and you had a better shot of getting in than otherwise. So that's where I went for undergrad. As an undergrad, I did political science. I did some literature and journalism classes, and then I completed all my prereq classes in biology, and you have to do organic chemistry and all these other things. And I completely agree with Dr. Singatham in like doing what you enjoy. There are thousands and thousands of like biology majors, but there are not many like music or art majors that apply to medicine. And it really helps you stand out when you have a different major from the grain. And also it makes your college experience a whole lot better. Like college is one time that you have in your life to truly explore what you're interested in and do what you want to do. And I feel like, just as Dr. Singatham said, like you have your whole life to do medicine. So yes, you have to do prereq classes, but don't just take like every biology and chemistry class because you think that you have to. So I was lucky in that I actually did end up getting into the medical school. So I went to SLU for med school as well. And then that led me to where I am today in regards to emergency medicine. So for those who aren't aware, emergency medicine is a specialty where we like evaluate and treat patients with like emergent and life-threatening conditions. So we see the heart attacks, the strokes, the serious infections, recent events, like all the COVID patients that you guys heard about that got put on or like put into a medical coma, got put on like a machine to help them breathe. They all come through the emergency department. Most of them come through the emergency department. So we're kind of like the primary gatekeepers to the hospital, and we see everyone from a newborn baby to like 100-year-old. We see the sick people, the well, and we see our community. One of the reasons I did emergency medicine is because I feel like it is a window into the community that few other people get to see. And we treat everyone regardless of age, race, ability to pay, and we'll either admit them or discharge them home. So emergency medicine is either a 3 or a 4-year residency program. I went to UC Davis up in Sacramento, which was 3 years. That's one of the reasons that I was kind of at that point, because I went straight through and I wanted to be done. But with regards to like an example of what one of my shifts, because I had a shift just last week where within 30 minutes I saw a patient who came in with a stroke. It was actually such a large stroke that they couldn't breathe on their own, and they needed to get a breathing tube put in and then get something called a TNK, which is like an emergent clot busting medication to help them out. And then right as I was walking back to call the ICU to get them admitted, we have the ambulance bring in another patient that has seizures that apparently just won't stop. So then after dealing with all that and kind of peeing my pants a little bit because of how scary all that was, then the next patient was just this 25-year-old guy that said he had a runny nose for 2 days and was terrified that he had COVID. So that's kind of like the dichotomy that you see in the emergency department. You see like really, really sick, dying people, and then you see people with like sniffles and a runny nose. And so honestly, for every like fun and interesting patient that you have like 10 or 20 patients that really don't need to be there. But even those patients can be rewarding because you get to reassure someone on what might be the worst day of their life, or someone who's like terrified for something that's actually nothing. You get to reassure them or their loved ones that they'll be okay. So for that, like I absolutely still early on in it. So there's like a lot of burnout in medicine. But as long as you're doing what you enjoy, really like, I think there's no other career like it. Because it's hard to say in any other field that literally every day you and your team are saving lives. And I know that's really cliche, but that's also kind of cool.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. And we'll hear from Dr. Godwani. Anika.
Thanks, Rocky. I'm just super excited to be here. As Rocky had mentioned, I was actually born in Fremont. I went to Irvington, before that Horner, and before that Millard. So I'm a true Fremont native. I knew I was interested in healthcare, but also potentially like politics or maybe law in high school. And then I realized I'm just too honest of a person. I can't do any lawyer work. So I decided just to pursue some sort of healthcare field. I ended up going to Berkeley, and during Berkeley, I decided to play my second year that I think medicine is for me. I actually looked at MD and DO schools and applied to both. But I was actually preferred going to DO school, for one, because they had a little bit more holistic approach to healthcare, which I really wanted to do. And also I really wanted to learn about OMM, which I know Rocky probably alluded to a little bit on the slides, but OMM is a great technique where we work on the musculoskeletal system to actually help reach the body to a better state of health. So they draw techniques from like massage and physical therapy and stuff. And so I just wanted an extra tool in my toolkit. And so it actually worked out well. I took my MCAT junior year, applied my senior year, and I got into a few medical schools and ended up getting to the one I really wanted to, which was actually Toro. I actually wanted to stay close to family. It's kind of funny, Rocky is actually my relative, and around that time, her daughter was born. I really wanted to be part of her life. And I just wanted to be part of or close to my family. So I decided to go to Toro, so it wasn't too far from home. Vallejo, as you know, is just a little bit across the bridge. And the one great part about Toro was that I made so many great friends, and it was like being back in college again. I lived in the dorms. I had friends in medical school, pharmacy school, and everyone was really excited to be there because we were all doing something we wanted to do. I don't know about you all, but high school, college, I feel like some of the classes you take are just not that interesting. And so medical school was the first time where every class I took, I was fascinated. And it was just so wonderful to go to school every day and want to learn and actually be excited about tests, because then I could test my knowledge. And I'm not the best test taker, so don't worry. So during medical school, and actually probably before that, I knew I wanted to go into family medicine. I think the doctor I always saw was my family doctor. And so I knew that I wanted to be that first doctor that a patient encounters. And the best part of family medicine is that we really take care of full families. And so I'll talk a little bit about residency. My third year of medical school, I met a doctor who went to residency in Modesto, and she raved about it. And my main goal was to go to residency where I could get full training. And so I could do things like deliver babies, do procedures in the clinic and procedures in the hospital, take care of sick patients in the hospital or the clinic. And so I ended up matching into family medicine Modesto, my top choice. And residency was tough. It's not quite like Grey's Anatomy or Scrubs. It's a little different. But it was definitely really rewarding. And I think that's what I really needed to help me become more independent. My dream job actually in residency was to be on faculty. And I actually graduated and joined the faculty at my program. And that's why I'm still in Modesto. And so I get to teach and train medical students that rotate through our program. I get to teach and train residents. I also get to work in my own clinic. So I'm seeing pregnant patients, and then going to see a kid with a cough, and then going to see an adult with congestive heart failure. So just a whole variety of patients and scenarios. So I love that about my job. I love the variety that we do get in family medicine. And I know burnout was kind of mentioned. Burnout's probably present in all fields, but definitely in medicine. And the main thing is we don't ever want to lose sight of why we're there. We're there for the patients. We're there to help improve their lives. And so I think medicine's changing, and it's nice to know that we can adapt and find other niches that we enjoy. And so I think for you all, because medicine's gonna be so different in 10 to 15 years, just know that if you do go into one field, you can find other things in that field that you enjoy more. One of my friends is family medicine trained. He really just likes addiction medicine. And so he does only addiction medicine, essentially. He does only like half a day a week of primary care. So you can really find what you like. One of my favorite things is actually LGBT care. So I actually do 2 clinics a month where I do LGBT care specifically. And so we all can find what we like, and that's kind of what keeps medicine interesting. So that's kind of my advice to you is it's okay if you have your heart set on something, and it's okay if that changes, and it's okay to move with the change. I think there's a question. I don't know. Rocky, do you want us to answer these as a group later?
Yeah, so we'll just, in fact, yeah, anyone who has questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and then we'll kind of open it up to everybody right afterwards.
Great. Yeah, that's all I had.
Okay. All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Anika. So I'm going to spotlight all three of you. I know there were some questions that have already come directly to me, but any high school kids that are on here, feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you might have. I'll start with I think Sia has a question. Sia, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
What is one thing you wished you had experienced in high school to get ready for medical school?
So whoever would like to start.
I don't think there was actually anything in particular in high school for me, maybe more college, but nothing really in high school. I think in high school, just keep all your options open. We've kind of talked about how it's okay if you don't in biology, major in what you want to major in and take those extra biology classes or chemistry or chem or whatever it is. But I don't know if there's anything specific for high school that I have.
I think that's a very common question and a good question. I definitely had that at every step of the way. Like in high school, I was like, what kind of class to prepare for college? And then it was for med school, and then it was for residency, and it's for a job. And then you realize once you actually started that there was really nothing that you could do to prepare for it. And you should live your stage and just kind of set yourself up to give you the most opportunities. One thing men in high school, if you have anybody that you know in medicine, is to try to see if you could do some shadowing or just like follow someone around in a hospital. I was the one in my family that I knew I didn't know anybody in my family in medicine. I didn't have any family friends in medicine. I was like the first person in our circle to go into medicine. But one thing that I wish I did was just kind of cold email a bunch of people. Like I didn't have the courage to do that. In high school, I thought like, why would this doctor want to respond to me or like I'm bothering them? But I feel like it's helpful. If you're really interested, then just look up a local hospital or university and just email an administrator or a doctor and say like, hey, I'm a high school student really interested in medicine. I'm just wondering if you could give me some more information about your field, what you do, or if I could like shadow you for a day or something like that. The worst that they could say is no, right? No one's going to like get mad at you or yell at you. So it's worth trying if you're interested at all. But other than that, I don't think that there's anything you could do to really prepare.
Awesome. Sarita, did you want to add to that?
No, like they were saying, I mean, high school is pretty far away, so there's not really anything other than just get good grades, because each time it just matters for the next step. So
and there's a bunch of questions that are in the chat. So one is this is a quick and easy question. I think Hamid, you had asked this. Do you still have to take the MCAT for the joint program? I think it's required for both, right?
I did. I had to take the MCAT in my program. The score was not that relevant for me in particular, as in like if you failed it, then they'd like look down on you, but like you didn't need to get like a 99th percentile or anything. But I know that there's a lot of programs, like some that my friends went to, that they don't have to take the MCAT. And then some, for example, like WashU's program, you have to take the MCAT and you have to get a minimum score on it. That minimum score is lower than what it would be if you applied to WashU like out of any other undergrad, but there's differences for each program. So I look into the details before you commit to one.
Okay, and then Hamid asked another question. This is for all three of you. Are the residency shifts, are they, I mean, there's a lot of talk about them being like 12 to 18-hour days. Is that really what it is? Or is it pretty hectic in residency?
yeah, I think each program and such is different, and now there's a lot more protection in terms of hours, not necessarily when I was there, but yeah, 24 36 hour, that stuff happens. You just do it. Everybody else is doing it too. So
yeah, we still have some 24-hour shifts. Actually, they recently allowed first years to get 24-hour shifts, which was taken away before. And my program only has like one 24-hour call on certain rotations, so it's very limited. Thankfully, we do try to protect the residents, but I mean, like Sarita said, you kind of just get used to it, and you squeeze in a nap if you can.
Yeah, it's very specialty dependent and program. Like if you're a neurosurgeon, you're typically working like 80 to 100-hour weeks. Technically, there's a legal cap by our governing organization saying that you can't work more than 80 hours a week. but that's just on paper. Some people work a lot more, but then there's also specialties where you work a lot less than that, like 40 hours a week or so if you're on clinic outpatient. So it really depends on like the program you go to and the culture there, but it is a lot better than it used to be.
And then actually, as an extension of that, there's a question, how do you deal with, I mean, these long days are one thing, right? But how do you deal with the high pressure in medical school, and then further as a medical professional? What are some of the things that you do to deal with that? Actually, sorry, and there's a follow-up question from similar to that. Were you still able to have a healthy social life during medical school and undergrad, or did you spend most of your time studying? So we'll take both of those questions together.
I think, I mean, I think it depends on what school you go to and such. I felt like I had more than enough time in undergrad for sure to make good grades and party and have fun and do all the things. I also felt like I had a healthy life in medical school in terms of, you know, there's times to study, that times I could go out. I will say I would look at the people that were married with kids and I was like, oh, wow, I don't know how y'all are doing that. But you only have X amount of time and you figure out, you know, how to spend it. If you get 3 hours, if you have a kid, you spend it with your kid. And if not, you're going out with your friends or, you know, so you'll adapt. Everybody adapts.
Veronica.
You need to like be disciplined early on, like in high school and undergrad. I think that's one thing in high school is like have a schedule or have a regimen on how you're going to study. I don't think you need to be super smart to be a doctor, but you definitely need to be a hard worker. Like you need to have some discipline. You need to work hard because you only have limited amount of time in a day. You need to make sure that you're optimizing that time to study and then also do things that you enjoy. Because if you're just studying 10 hours a day every day, you're going to burn out and you're going to hate your life. And that's another reason to think about like medicine, in that if you go into medicine because your parents want you to go into medicine, or you think that being a doctor is like the best thing ever, you're going to be miserable and you're going to hate it, because no one is going to want to study 10 hours a day every day for like USMLE step 1 when all of your other friends are basically like, for example, I was super jealous in med school because most of my friends went into computer science. So I had my friends who graduated Berkeley or like San Jose State or something in like 3 years because their AP classes counted, and they were making like $150,000 or $200,000 a year, whereas I was in 60K of debt every year in undergrad. And so when you think about that, like, and you're studying 8 or 10 hours a day, that could really be a dangerous spiral. So you have to really evaluate why you're doing what you're doing and if you feel like it's worth it for you. For me, I just kept reminding myself that, hey, it's like really what I want to do. I want to be a physician. I want to do emergency medicine, and with that motivation, it becomes easy, so to say.
Nika, did you want to add anything to that?
No, thanks.
Okay. So the next question is about high school. I know that it was a while ago, but how many science classes did you take in high school, and what classes were there? Were there any in particular that were like super important for medical school, or you say just, I think a lot, you've answered a lot of the stuff in terms of do what makes you happy, but did you have any thoughts on that? The classes that you take, APs or otherwise, that you take in high school?
Yeah, I took like bio, or honors bio, then AP bio, then AP chem, and just regular physics. And I mean, the AP classes probably help to raise your GPA, right? But none of it really counted for undergrad. I still took all the same classes again because med school requires you to do all those classes anyway. So taking the AP classes did nothing really to help me as far as counting for credit in college. But it did help prepare you definitely for the rigor of the class in college. So
yeah, I recommend that if you're interested in medicine, that you try, if you can, take AP Bio, AP Chem, because those are 2 of your prereq classes in med school, in undergrad, and those are often the weed out classes for a lot of people freshman year. So me, after taking AP Bio and AP Chem, it was basically the same thing over again in college, at least where I went to college. So it was a lot less stressful because I'm like, hey, I did this before. And it's also helpful to kind of take classes, like in my example, like I took AP Comp Sci because I thought I'd like it, and then I hated it. So if you realize that you take something and you don't enjoy it, then that could be something to help you realize, hey, maybe this is not something that I want to do.
Actually, just kind of, I'll add to that, because in the last session, we had talked a lot about, like, in high school, there's all this pressure to conform to what others say, right? Take 10, 12 APs, get involved in everything. In hindsight, looking back now, I mean, to maybe the stress that you had in high school and now understanding the process and what you've gone through, is there anything that you would have done differently in high school? Or you would have changed about the way you did stuff in high school, now that you understand the process?
I could speak. I feel like I'm talking a lot, so I'm gonna talk a little bit less going forward. But I feel like this is a very controversial opinion, and people are gonna disagree with me strongly. But I feel like, at least for medicine, or at least in the path that I went through, I think I emphasize, and my community, my college, Cupertino High, is very similar, I feel, to like Irvington High, Mission, or like other Bay Area high schools, in that people are very hyper competitive, and they think that you need to take as many APs as you can. You need to go to the best undergrad school, or your life is meaningless and you're not going to amount to anything. I took half the AP classes, if that, of most of my friends, because I'm like, I didn't think that I could do it. Whether or not I could was a different story, but I didn't want that pressure. But at the same time, I kept getting that pressure saying, hey, if you don't get into this school, you'll think that you're not going to have a good life. And I felt super, super depressed at the end of senior year, because I didn't get into any of the schools that my friends got into. And I thought that I'd amount to nothing because of that. And then I realized, hey, where you go to college doesn't really matter, especially for medicine. It's how you do in college. I have a good amount of friends who went to schools like WashU or Berkeley, which actually has grade deflation. And at the end of the day, your GPA and what you do in undergrad is important. If you work your butt off at these schools and you get a 3.5 GPA, which is fantastic for Berkeley, by the way, but it is not good enough for a lot of medical schools. They want like a 3.7, 3.8, 3.9, then it's kind of meaningless. But if you go to a less well-known school and you get like really good grades, and you have the time to explore options, you do volunteering, you do community service, you do shadow at hospitals, and that will give you a much stronger application than if you were stuck studying all day because you needed to just do that much better. So I don't think it really matters, at least for medicine, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, where you go to college. I think it's better to go to somewhere that you could be happy, and go to somewhere where you could feel like you have opportunity. That's the biggest thing for going to a good school, is that they give you opportunity for research or connections or something else like that. But you don't need to go to a super tough school or prestigious school in order to do medicine. I have a bunch of friends who went into amazing specialties like plastic surgery, neurosurgery, dermatology, go into no-name state schools because it was cheap, it was close to family, and it was something that they were comfortable with. So I think that's one thing that we overemphasize, especially in the South Bay and the East Bay, that where you go to college matters. Obviously, how hard you work is important, but it's not end all be all.
Sweetha or Nika, do you guys want to add to that?
No, I mean, I tend to agree. For the medical path, your undergrad, the name of your undergrad does not matter as much as it would for some other things. I think that 4 years is just about your experience, learning how to study. And it's your one chance to be in college. Like, go somewhere where you're going to enjoy your 4 years, because you're not going to get that back. So,
Nika?
Yeah, I'm trying to think, because I know so much has changed over the years. Like, I think the amount of AP classes that were offered when I was in high school have like probably doubled by now. So I don't know if I can give any like more relevant information. I probably only took like 7 or 8 AP classes total, because I don't think they offered any more than that. So yeah, I don't know if I can add more to that.
Okay, and I think there's quite a few questions about like research opportunities or internships and all that you guys took advantage of in high school in the summers or during school. Was there anything in particular that could just kind of stood out that not necessarily in relation to medical school or in terms of preparing you for medical school, because I don't think there's really anything in high school necessarily, as all of you mentioned, but in terms of developing the social skills and the work ethics, or, just the idea of figuring out what you like and what you don't like, what your strengths and weaknesses. Was there any type of activity in high school that you thought was really helpful in terms of that, or things that you wish you would have done with regards to activities? And actually, I'll just add that some people, there's a couple of questions about volunteering in the hospitals. I know, Amma, you mentioned about reaching out to doctors and just shadowing them and talking to them, but I also know it's very common for kids to do this volunteering program in the hospital, like taking photos of babies or pushing people in wheelchairs. Is that helpful? Or is there something that's more relevant, given now that you guys work in that framework, and I'm sure you see high school kids getting and doing different things?
Especially in different settings. One was in the hospital, one was in the clinic setting, so it's good to get that variety. I never volunteered at a hospital when I was in high school. I know some people in our residency have. And it might look good on the application, at least you've been in a hospital setting, you kind of know how some things move, but really you're not doing a lot when you're volunteering, so I do want you to know that it's more of like delivering mail, or going around the unit and delivering things. You're not actually doing any kind of hands-on healthcare work.
I think it really depends on what you do with it. I strongly recommend volunteering in some capacity at a hospital. I volunteered at Stanford's gift shop for all 4 years. I started as a freshman. And then when I was a junior, I actually met a physician who would regularly come to the gift shop to buy chocolate for his nurses and stuff like that. And then so I started talking to him and told him, hey, I'm applying to college. I don't really know what I'm going to be doing. I think I might be political science and biology, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, hey, why don't you just shadow me for a little while and see what I do? And he was like an internal medicine doctor. So out of me doing kind of mindless work in a gift shop just to get volunteer hours for college, I was able to meet someone, and then he let me follow him around for a couple of days. And then through him, I met a pathologist. And then through him, I got into this volunteer program at the VA. So I feel like it's important to get yourself in a situation where you can meet people that can then help further your interests. So I think it's useful to be a volunteer, but at the same time, if you start off in something, just try to get your foot in the door to do something a little bit more productive. If I was just in a gift shop for 4 years, then that would not have helped me decide if I wanted to do medicine or not. But getting my foot in the door, because that was the only opportunity, helped me meet a physician who then helped me realize that I wanted to explore medicine.
Sarita, did you want to add to that, or? Okay, and so there are a couple of other questions. So there's a couple of people messaged me privately about what is the best aspect of your job, and what is the worst aspect of your job?
I mean, I think it goes back to kind of the cliche of, your hands-on opportunity to help people. I mean, I think that's the foundation of why we all went into this. And, day to day, you see people, help them. They thank you. You remember why you did this from the get-go. The worst part about it is how it is just getting more politicized, more money-based, more businessy. Private equities coming in, lots of the business side of it that you don't think about at your stage does play a part when you're actually, working and making money. So.
Mika, Amr, do you guys want to add to that?
Yeah, I can add to it. I mean, I agree with what you said as well, Sarita. I guess the one downside, it's probably more of a primary care thing, but it's seeing endless amounts of patients in little time, and having people wait, and having people get mad at you for waiting, and I feel like I'm apologizing every 15 minutes to someone. So that's probably my least favorite part. Is I know I value everyone's time, but it's difficult sometimes when you're running around trying to help take care of people. And 15 minutes is not enough to take care of every medical problem they have, including their preventative care, ordering mammograms, colonoscopies, all that, and then handling their depression or their chest pain as they're about to leave the room. So The pressures of medicine.
The business aspects of it, right? In general, right?
A huge part of your job is something that you cannot control at all and is dictated by MBAs who have never touched a patient in their life. And that is very, very frustrating. And that leads to burnout because you are not able to provide your patients the care that they need because of some extrinsic factor that you are not aware about and you have no control over. And that can be really frustrating. And that's what leads to a lot of burnout. But that being said, I feel at this stage in your careers, just realize that medicine has like infinite opportunity in it. There are so many different specialties. You could see patients all the time in clinic, or you could be in the operating room all day, or you could be a radiologist and in some types of radiology, not even have to interact with a patient ever, or like a pathologist, or there's so many different avenues to medicine that at this stage, I feel like just decide if like the field in general is something that's appealing to you. I think another positive is in a lot of careers in medicine, there's a lot of flexibility in your job. I know people that work 3 days a week. I know like in emergency medicine, you could work as many or as few shifts as you want. I have some friends now who just recently had kids, so they're working 6 shifts a month. And you still make a good amount of money and you could live a quality middle class, maybe not in the Bay Area, but anywhere else in the country, you could live a decent life just working a few days a month, honestly. And it's rare in other careers that you could go almost anywhere in the country and still be well paid. Like for example, in like really high tech jobs, you probably have to be like in big cities or near certain hubs, but you could go to like rural Nebraska if you wanted to, and you could still be a physician and make good amounts of money and have impact on your community. So there's a lot of flexibility in medicine.
There's a couple of questions about the costs of medical school, how you guys handled the debt. I know, actually, even before we get to that, I think to kind of lead into that discussion, there's a question about how many total years after high school did you have to go through just before you start working? And then I think that kind of leads into this question of, well, then that's the amount of debt and all that you're accumulating per year. How did you handle the costs for it? How many years did you guys study from undergrad through medical school and residency before you actually started working and earning money?
So 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, 3 years of residency for me.
So 11 years. And Saritha and Amar, was that about the same for you guys?
Mine was 13.
And Amar, what was yours? Saritha, yours was
Mine was the same too.
13?
Or 11.
11.
For
yeah.
undergrad, 4 med school, and 3 residency.
So how did
realize that it's also becoming really common now for people to take like gap years, oftentimes multiple gap years. So like after undergrad, people take a year or two off to either take like a post back to boost their GPA or explore what they want, or take the MCAT. So oftentimes it ends up being a lot longer than that. And depending on what specialty you do, for example, like the longest residency is neurosurgery, that's like 7 years. Or you could do something and then do a fellowship after, which is extra years. So it could be the shortest timeline really is 11, and then it could be up to like 20, depending on what you want to do.
And how do you guys deal with the costs associated with medical school?
I'll say that the costs have changed actually a lot over the years. I graduated medical school in I think 2011. And I know people who are in residency now who graduated just a few years ago, and their costs are almost double mine. So I will say that my perspective is a little different. I think I had about 160,000 for medical school 4 years when I graduated, and I work at an FQHC lookalike. So it's a federally qualified health center. So I take care of only underserved patients, and so I actually got some government funding. So between some of the government funding I got, as well as just me paying like crazy, I paid off my loans in 3 years after residency. My friends who are here now really cannot do that because they have $500,000 in debt. So I know that for them it's a bit more of a struggle, but I think it is possible to take out the loans and make payments as long as you know that you're going to live frugally for years after you graduate residency.
We'll say there is a reason why most people that go into medicine come from families that are middle class or upper class, because it is very, very expensive. I ended up taking out loans for everything. I have almost $500,000 in debt. I think it's very, very important to live frugally. Like right now, I am in my parents' house. I moved back in with my parents after residency because I save 3 to 4 grand a month in rent, and then I could use their car. And I'm lucky in that I have that option. A lot of people don't, but I know that it is a huge cost. It's an opportunity cost. I think it's foolish not to consider it, but at the same time, it is very, very feasible to pay that off. I think the bigger risk is you going through halfway and then realizing you don't want to do it and then being straddled with a bunch of debt. That's a whole nother story, particularly with like Caribbean med schools that can be predatory, but I digress. But yes, it is a lot of debt. It's anywhere from 100K to 250K. Another reason why your college doesn't matter, going to a state school that is much cheaper and is subsidized and doing well there is often the smarter move than paying $70,000 for a name brand private school that will likely not get you significantly more opportunities. So definitely consider the money, but then also realize that you will have more than enough to pay it off in a reasonable amount of time as long as you're responsible.
Awesome. Otherwise we have, unless, I hope I haven't missed any questions in the chat, but I have one last question. Unless, if there's any questions, does anybody have any other questions before we ask this last question? Okay, so the last question is, so family medicine, emergency medicine, anesthesiology. So wait, real quick, there's a question Linda's just asked about liability insurance. I know that's, and each of you've kind of mentioned that, but is liability insurance, I've heard for a lot of doctors, it's kind of overwhelming. Is it a big concern for a lot of people, for the doctors?
I guess I'm lucky because the place I work at, because it's government sponsored, the costs are covered, so I don't have to pay anything for those.
I think
most
it depends.
jobs your employer will cover it.
Srita, what were you gonna say?
No, it just depends on what field and where you are. I'm in Texas for storage farm, so everybody's malpractice insurances are cheaper than some of the places I've heard in the Northeast. I met a guy who was a neurosurgeon who paid over 100K in malpractice. So it just is very variable depending on where you live.
And actually this kind of leads into the last question I had, because I know I've spoken to Srita about this specifically, that certain fields have more inherent risks than other fields, right? Now, knowing what you guys have kind of gone through, your friends that are practicing in various areas, I mean, you guys were in family medicine, emergency medicine, anesthesiology. Would you have done a different specialty if you had known what life would be like and what the risks and all, or would you have stuck with your current specialty?
I would stick with the current specialty.
Srita Amar?
Go ahead.
I mean, I think if I knew day one of med school that I could get into derm, I would have done derm. I would have worked harder for it. So, but I think that's probably 99% of people would say as well. So.
Yeah, I think there's a common sentiment in medicine, like the grass is always greener. And I feel like there's always like thought that I would like, for example, I knew nothing about anesthesia when I was in medicine or when I was in med school, because we didn't have like an anesthesia rotation. I feel like that would probably be the other specialty that I would have done, because there's like a lot of overlap. But I don't know, I feel like you kind of pick what you do because you enjoy it, and there's always what could have been, but I think it's best not to dwell on that. And if you really want to and you really hate your job, you can always do another residency. Again, the cost, but you can switch if you want to.
And do you guys see yourself in this same field in 20 years?
As opposed to retired, or
as opposed to doing something else completely not medicine?
Not medicine. I could see a side gig for sure. I think especially with anesthesia, like at some point you're just that old crotchety person walking around in the OR that people don't want you there. But I would involve, something along the lines of like a teaching, something involving like helping teach the next generation.
Anika, Amar? You see yourself doing this in 20 years?
I think I definitely want to cut down and do part-time in 20 years. Part of what I do is actually teaching residents in their own clinic and precepting with them. So I think that'd be fun to do that, and some other things that maybe more telemedicine or things that are more, different, maybe not as stressful.
Yeah, emergency medicine in particular is like a very hard and demanding job, like mentally and physically. So I hope I'm not working as much in 20 years, but I think the big thing is I still love what I do and I just want to do less of it. And I'm lucky that I have the flexibility to cut down. So I'd probably work part-time and then do some teaching or something else like that, but I wouldn't necessarily switch to something else.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I really appreciate all three of you stepping up to do this and to talk and share your experiences. I think Amr said, one of the reasons behind this was that, when I was in high school, I didn't know anything about anything, right? And so just being able to kind of experience or understand what which each career entails, and what are the good things and what are the bad things, knowing who I am, right? That would have been super helpful. And so I really, really appreciate all three of you coming and sharing your experiences. I do want to summarize a couple of things that you guys said, that for the kids that are on here. One is that nothing in high school is really going to make or break what you do in medical school or beyond. And so, the goal in high school and college, for that matter, is to explore as much as you can, enjoy life, right? Figure out yourself, what you like and what you don't like, where your strengths and where your weaknesses are. And then everything just kind of falls into place, as opposed to, I think that a couple had mentioned this, is that as opposed to doing what you think is expected of you or doing what you think others want you to do what you need to do to figure out what you like and who you are. That's the first thing. Second thing is, APs and classes, should be used as kind of an exploratory means. So whether it's biology or chemistry or whatever like that, take them so that you understand what you like. So like Amr said, taking computer science and then figuring out that this is not what I want to do with my life. That's the value of a high school class that is so sheltered. And, everything becomes a little harder in college, and then it becomes even harder after college. I think it was mentioned about readout classes. Readout classes are a big thing in college. And these are those intro classes, intro biology, chemistry and all, especially at a lot of the state schools, where they'll have 300 people in a session. If you fail that class, those are the ways they kick people out of the colleges. And so, if those are things that you may or may not like, it's good to experience them in high school, as opposed to where you're given a lot more hand holding than in college. And then the last thing which is actually super, super important, just like, all three of these doctors volunteer their time to talk to the students here. Most doctors, especially ones that have graduated in the last 10, 15 years, are more than willing to give their time and talk to you, or, at least help you figure out your doubts, help you figure out, what you should be looking at and what the whole medical profession is about, or lawyers or business or engineering. You just have to spend the time to reach out to them. So I think that if you're interested in radiology or mechanical engineering or whatever, look for people in the community, do those things, and just send them a quick email and just say, I want 5-10 minutes of your time to ask you some questions. I'm a high school student. I don't know what I want to do. And then, go forward. In the first session, we had talked about figuring out a couple of majors, researching them, seeking people in those communities for advice, shadowing them, and then internships just kind of flow from there. So I would suggest to everyone, all the kids kind of follow this pattern, but reach to people like Anika, Sarita, and Amr that can help guide you. I'm sorry, I'm volunteering y'all's time a little bit more, but or just that you can make sure you're looking at things in the right way, right, as opposed to an idealistic way. So thank you guys, all three of you. Thank you so much for being on here and sharing your experiences. Any last things you guys want to add to any of the stuff? So you guys are happy?
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. All right.
Bye.